My name is Andy Hornby, photographer and vlogger. 15 years ago I started teaching myself photography. Today I travel the UK as a professional wedding photographer, landscape photographer and filmmaker. Learn from my experiences, my mistakes and my tips and advice. Join me on my photography adventures. Hey guys, welcome to another video. This one's going to be a little bit more for the beginner landscape photographer. I am always being asked in my workshops what do I keep in my bag that makes my life easier, and it's generally from those photographers who are maybe new to landscapes or really haven't taken their photography thought process to that next level just yet, to the, the more intermediate type of stuff. But there are a few things you can keep in your bag to make your life a bit easier. The issue I'm always finding is when you get to a location, you've got your camera, you get to a location and you see a composition that you really like, to the human eye looks awesome, and you take a picture and you get it back to wherever you get it back to, you upload it to Facebook or wherever, and evidently the picture you see in 2D on your computer isn't quite what you saw when you were at that location. It happens all the time, happens to me. You can go somewhere, and you know me, I generally will research my locations, but even sometimes I get to a location and it's not quite what I expected in camera. Often or not you don't see it while you're there, and I think the biggest issue there is when you're shooting during the day, like now. I tend not to. There is a caveat to that, and I'll come to that in a little bit. But during the day, around lunchtime, I generally don't shoot landscapes. And it's mainly due to the dynamic range of the camera and the sun being out as it is today. It's a lovely, beautiful day. Doesn't lend for great shots for a number of reasons. I've done plenty of videos on that, so you can go and have a look at my videos on why I don't shoot during the day. I'll put a link up there as well so you can see. But when you get to a location, your eyes see a lot of detail in both the highlights and the shadows, and your camera doesn't do that, and cameras at the moment aren't good enough to get that same image that you see in your head onto the sensor. It just won't do it. Now you can bracket your exposures, so you can get the detail in the highlights and the detail in the shadows, and you can work with that in Lightroom or Photoshop. But generally speaking, if you haven't got a few essential bits and pieces in your bag, there's a good chance that you won't get the shot that you're expecting to get. So that's essentially what this video is about. It's about having a few tips and tricks and advice and a few bits of gear that I think are probably necessary for the beginner photographer. You will find that hobbyist photographers and definitely pro photographers will have these in their bag, and they will have these thought processes going on in their mind when they take pictures. But for those that aren't quite there yet, those that are just starting out, just learning, this video is for you. So I think these 8 tips and bits of advice are going to really set you off as a beginner and take your photography to that next level. So let's do this. Okay, so you can see behind me Southsea Castle, which I've shot a few times. You can see the lighthouse as well. Brilliant place to shoot. There was a fountain in a little bit of a pond out the front. They're redoing that to make a nice fountain type thing, shooty uppy thing, Vegas style. They're spending loads of money on it. I don't know why they're doing it. It was beautiful beforehand, but it is what it is. They spend money where they spend money. So, number one, I am going to assume you've got a camera, fairly good interchangeable lens camera if you can, and we'll get into number one. So number one, and probably the most important, is choose the right time of day and shoot in the right light, because shooting in the sun like this is not going to do you any favours at all. Trust me, if you haven't seen it already, you're bound to see it in your pictures. When you go out at midday and you've got really harsh sunlight like this, it's like lighting a subject from directly above. If you're taking portraits, it's exactly the same for landscapes. You start lighting with a really harsh light like that that's not diffused, and your landscapes are going to look really rubbish. I mean, you can see me in video now. I'm lit there and I'm in shadow there because it's so harsh. Your camera can't distinguish between the light areas and the dark areas as much as your eyes can. So what may look nice to you up in here just won't work in camera, because the cameras today aren't as good as your eyes are, trust me. So something that looks really nice lit with a harsh sun like this, it's just not going to work. That's number one. Number two, use a tripod. For God's sake, get a tripod, even if it's not an expensive one. If you're doing landscape photography, you need a tripod. That simple. You know, I have a few workshop attendees that do turn up without a tripod, but for landscapes generally, you're going to be using your shutter speed to determine your exposure, because on my workshops make it simple. I use ISO 100 and I have an f-stop of about f10, and all you're working with is your shutter speed. Now, sometimes when we're working at the times of days when we want to do landscape shots, which is early in the morning, late in the evening, you're going to have a fairly long shutter speed, and you need to stick it on a tripod. You can't do landscape photography handheld. You can do snapshot photography handheld, because that's fine. Let your camera do whatever it wants to do. But if you're doing landscapes and you want to get your pictures to the next level, the absolute next level, you need a tripod. Number three, consider where your horizon's going to be. Now, you might take a snapshot normally of a composition. Your horizon's dead center, which is brilliant. But often or not, you're going to want to use the rule of thirds. Now, you're going to want to pull the horizon either to the top third or the bottom third. Now, if this doesn't make any sense to you, have a look at this picture and you'll see that my horizon is really in the center of the image. Now, I do this to add interest, either interest in the sky, if there's interest in the sky, or if I've got a nice landscape, I'll have interest in the landscape. So consider this just to make your composition a little bit better, make your image look a little bit better. It'll be received better by people who are looking at it, because the way people read images, they read in rule of thirds. You may have heard this term before. There's loads of information out there for it. I don't need to explain on this video. Have a quick Google. Rule of thirds is a big deal. Sometimes though, if you're using a wide angle lens, for instance, if you tilt your camera up or tilt your camera down to get the horizon on either of those rule of thirds, you're going to distort the image. So what I sometimes do, and this is a little trick that I've learned over the years, is actually shoot the horizon dead center, but then take it into an editing software afterwards and then crop in the bottom or the top to get the horizon on that line. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, rule of thirds, have a Google of rule of thirds and you'll understand completely what I mean. Number three. Okay, number four, think about adding a filter. Now, it's not the kind of thing everyone has in their bag, and they're not sometimes that cheap. You can get really cheap ones which add a bit of colour cast, but an ND filter is going to take your photography, and I kid you not, to the absolute next level. If you can afford to get one, put it in your bag, because if you want to shoot during a day like this, you can see all the harsh shadows behind me in the bandstand. It's just terrible. Don't shoot during the day unless you A, have an ND filter, or B, the sun's diffused with clouds. So an ND filter is going to allow you to slow your shutter speed down. If you're anywhere near water or if it's a cloudy day, you can do long exposure. As long as you've got a bit of interest in your picture, something in the foreground, perhaps like a pier, a little bit like this, or anything in your foreground, and you have some nice clouds, and you're going to get milky seas or milky water if you're near a pond or something like that. And trust me, if you're shooting during the day, you're going to want an ND filter in your bag. There are other filters as well, so you can get UV filters and you can get polarizing filter. Now, polarizing filter is good. I keep one in my bag. I rarely use it, to be honest with you. The idea of a polarizing filter is if you're shooting anything like water, you can get rid of the reflections off the water. Often or not, I don't want to do that, because I like, if I've got some kind of interest in the sky, the reflection off the water is what I want in my image. And sometimes you spin it around and put it on the sky, so it darkens the sky down. If you want, you can use it a little bit like a graduated ND filter. I'm not going to go into filters in this video. Have a quick bit of research on Google for ND filters and other filters for your lenses, and trust me, if you want to take your pictures to another level and you want to get a bit of long exposure stuff going on, which we'll come on to in a minute, an ND filter is going to need to be in your bag. Okay, number 5, and this is a controversial one. If you can, start shooting RAW. I know it's difficult, and there's a big debate on RAW versus JPEG. It is still ongoing. It has been ongoing for a number of years now. But with a RAW image, you are going to get a lot more detail and a lot more capabilities afterwards to change and swap things around that you can't do with a JPEG. A JPEG is generally regarded as a finished image. If you take it into an editing software like Lightroom or Photoshop, you don't have as much control of the editing side of it than if you did if you shot in RAW. So bear that in mind. Have a research on RAW. Again, this video isn't about RAW. I have done a video on RAW versus JPEG before, which I'll link up there potentially, and hopefully you'll start shooting RAW and you'll understand the difference, and you'll get better images straight from your camera. That's number 5. Okay, number 6. Try long exposure. I've said this time and time again, if you want to take your photography to the next level, long exposure is so easy to do. Comes back to having an ND filter. You probably need one of those. If you want to take a picture that not many people can take, and it's relatively easy to do, and I do workshops on it, I've got videos on it. Have a look up there for the video on long exposure photography. I'm going to be doing another one again soon, I'd imagine, to update the one I've done before, because that was a long time ago, last year. But long exposure photography, you will take a picture that millions of people have taken before. However, your take on it and your long exposure version of it is going to look so much better than anyone else's. Trust me, long exposure photography, get into it, get an ND filter, start doing them, and I trust you, your pictures, if you post to Instagram or Facebook, anywhere on social media, they're welcomed more than any other image, because I live on the south coast in South Sea, and there are millions and millions of things to shoot. The problem is millions and millions of photographers around here have shot exactly the same thing millions of times, all the same way, all using the same settings. It's fine, but if you do a long exposure of that same thing, so different to anyone else's images, and you'll notice a complete change. So if there's one thing I can say taken away from this video, is get into long exposure photography, start learning it. It's not difficult. Like I said, I've done a video on it. Settings are really easy. As long as you get a base setting, and then everything's in manual, like your focus and your white balance potentially is in manual. Put an ND filter on the front, and you're golden. Take a picture, recalculate with an app. Apps are easy, you don't need to do the math in your head. Get an app, and in 10 seconds you've set up a shot that you could potentially do a 2-minute exposure, 10-minute exposure. I've done a 17-minute exposure if you watch that video. And absolutely, I mean, I didn't need to. It's ridiculous. Why would you want to do a 17-minute exposure? But if you live by the sea or by water and you've got nice clouds in the sky potentially, even without water, clouds in the sky make for a brilliant long exposure. I've done stuff down in Brighton with the bandstand in Brighton, and that picture just went off on Facebook and Instagram because it's something completely different that everybody's got before, but it's just completely different to everyone else's. So long exposure photography, if I can drill something into your head today, is start long exposure photography. Trust me, it will completely change your photography. That's number 6. Okay, number 7 is focusing a little trick with your settings, with your focus. Generally going to want to shoot focus in manual, so you manually focus, but try and focus 1/3 up in your frame. So if you think about the rule of thirds we spoke about earlier on, your horizon potentially is going to be on that lower rule of thirds potentially. If not, it's going to be in the top rule of thirds, but focus on the first rule of thirds there. So 1/3 up in your image, focus on that part. Have a shallow f-stop, so you're going to be at f10, something like that, and pretty much everything in your image is going to be in focus. If you are shooting in a wide aperture, there's going to be something out of focus and you don't want that. There is a thing called focus stacking which is a bit more advanced, so for the time being, remember when you focus manually and focus on the one thing that is 1/3 up in your image on your composition, so focus on that. I see a lot of images from photographers that are really nice, they've composed really nice, they're using the rule of thirds, it looks gorgeous, but it's slightly out of focus, and that's the reason why they're not focusing on what they should be focusing on. Potentially they're focusing on the middle of their screen, which if your horizon is on the lower thirds, is going to be somewhere in the sky, so it's going to be focusing to infinity. The stuff in the foreground is going to have a fall off and it's going to be out of focus, so remember that. Bad f10 and focus 1/3 up into your image and you'll be golden. Nice. Okay, last but by no means least, have a try at a vertical shot, because not many landscape photographers do this. I've done it a few times. I've got to admit, I don't do it a lot, and I probably should do it a little bit more, but a nice vertical shot of a landscape, a little bit like this, is often very nice. And the shot you're watching at the moment, I actually originally shot in a landscape. I didn't shoot it like this, and I cropped in to make this crop, because when the shot was wide in landscape, you saw a lot more than what you needed to. A bit more cluttered, more boats on the right hand side of the image, and just this little crop just from there, nice little vertical crop, cropped all those out. It kept the Spinnaker Tower in focus, 1 or maybe 2 boats in the foreground, and that's pretty much it. Everybody loved this better than the original crop, so give that a go as well. You may not shoot in landscape, turn the camera on the side if you don't want to do that, keep it in landscape, but then make a little crop in, have your subject on a rule of thirds like the Spinnaker Tower is in that picture. So everyone worked out in that image, and it all worked out fine. It looked good and it was well received on social media, so that's good. Thumbs up, right? Okay, so there you have it. They are my 8 tips and tricks. If you're a beginner photographer, these are going to get you started with just advancing your photography just a little bit. I'm not here to tell you how to do things. If you want to do it your own way, that's fine. But just take a few of these into account the next time you go out. You find a nice composition and you realise that the shot isn't really doing anything for you in camera. Try a few of these out, see if you can just make that picture just a little bit better with a few tips. And I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please slap a like on it, on the video. That really helps me out. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel. I try and put a video up each week if I can. If you hit the little notification bell, you should get notified when I upload my next one. So until the next time, guys, have a good one. Stick around if you like, 'cause I'm going to do a few more bits and pieces over by the hovercraft, which is just over there. I'm currently by the monument in Southsea. Love this place. I've shot it a few times. So stick around for a few more bits and pieces if you want, but if not, please subscribe to my channel and I'll see you on another video. Thanks very much. Bye. Can't believe this thing's doing a bloody update. Damn it, should have updated at home. Noob.